Good afternoon, class 9. We are about to start your chapter, that is All Summer in a Day by Ray Bradbury. Now, before beginning the chapter, I just want you to concentrate a bit on science fiction because it has a close connection, or it is a science fiction. Now, you can understand by its name, it's a combination of two words, science and fiction. One is technology and another is fictitious or imaginative. So you can understand by its name, science fiction is such kind of writing where fact and fancy are mixed together. So it is a mixture of reality and imagination. Now, if you look at the text, if you look at the beginning of the text is an excerpt from a science fiction which gives us an imaginary account of life on the planet Venus. You can understand it's an imaginary account of life because imagination is very, very important in any of the science fiction because you have to believe what you are reading or what you are listening. It touchingly narrates the keen expectation of the children of Venus who eagerly wait for the sun to appear after 7 years. So you can understand it is an imaginative account of the planet Venus. The deviation of the text from what we know as scientific only adds to the imaginative element of the text. As I already mentioned that you can understand the areas of science, suppose the rockets, those areas of technology, and also the our planetary system, the Venus, the sun, reference to those those areas. Now, coming back to this point, what we talk about, that's why you will understand that science fiction is such a very, very interesting text where you will get an idea of both science and fiction. Okay, so when we talk about this text, before beginning to the text, I will send you an presentation on science fiction and some important facts on of All Summer in a Day, which you will read and you will try to understand. And if you see science fiction is an unique area of literature. And the question will arise that why it's an unique. So it is a prose writing. So how it can be unique? Now, science fiction is unique in its ability to do two things simultaneously. Number one, address important contemporary issues in a direct and literal manner. And number two, address universal human issues in an indirect or even an metaphorical manner. Now, if you look at the major themes of science fiction, now it may be time travel, what we call the time machine. Next, it is with the aliens. Next, the parallel world is another very, very important theme of this science fiction. And another very, very important theme is that when we talk about that telepathy is another beautiful example of science fiction. And if I can give you some examples of science fiction which you must know, the main person behind it, his name is H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells is very, very famous for this science fiction writing, and his famous novels include The Time Machine. As you can understand, from one time zone to another time zone, from one era to another era you can travel. It's absolutely imaginative, but he beautifully depicted it in the novel The Time Machine. Second one, The Invisible Man, another one, that the person you can't see, the person may be standing in front of you, but you can't see that person, The Invisible Man. And another very important writing which is coming into my mind is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, is another very, very important example. And Ray Bradbury is another very, very important book, that is Fahrenheit 451. It's very, very important. So these are some of the examples of popular science fictions. So if you think of this text, All Summer in a Day, it is a text about emotions. You can understand this text talked about different kinds of emotions, different kinds of attitudes, and how this has an impact on our psychology. This text talked about it. Now this is a text which talk about life. This text talk about melancholy. This text talked about hope, and this text talked about a promise for a tomorrow, or what we call the promise for a better tomorrow. Because when the sun is rising for only an hour after 7 years, so people have to hope, people have to live for a better tomorrow. So that's why it is a symbolic text, and in this text different natural elements like rain, the sun, the planet Venus, the atmosphere, that talked about different things. Okay, so it is almost about the introductory class. Now I will go into the details of the text tomorrow. So just go through the text, the first few pages, and along with that I will give you another presentation on science fiction and other areas of Ray Bradbury's All Summer in a Day. You just go through it. Okay, thank you. We'll meet again in the next class. Hello my dear students. As I already mentioned in the last class, and I think all of you have seen my presentation. In the presentation I talk a lot about science fiction and the reference of science fiction which has been made here in the text All Summer in a Day. Now if you look at the text, if I take up some important areas of the text, you can understand the text starts with a feeling of despair. You can if I read that area, it had been raining for 7 years. Thousands upon thousands of days fill from one end to the another with rain. So you can understand, heavy storms cause tidal waves to come over the island. So the story starts with a despair. It's the incessant rain we are referring to, and which were continuing for the 7 years, long 7 years. And the children, the men and women, they came by rockets from the earth. And you can understand that they are eagerly waiting for the sun. And when they were in the class, they chatted and pressed each other like so many roses. They peered out of the window to look at the hidden sun. But in the midst of the expectation, the rain continues. Now suddenly one of them gave a ray of hope, and he said, "It's stopping, it's stopping." Now the writer referred here that the children were all 9 years old when the sun came out last time. 7 years ago they were too young. So at that present moment of time they were 9 years. So actually 7 years before they were of 2 years. So they simply can't understand anything about the sun. And through their imagination, through their imaginative power, they thought a lot about the sun. The sun as a lemon, the sun as a big orange. And they wrote small stories, essays and poems about the sun. And they wrote very beautiful 2 lines poem. I think the sun is a flower that blooms for just 1 hour. So you can understand from the beginning of the text, although there is a silver lining of the coming out of the sun, but the children were reminded every time that the happiness will last for only an hour. So this is quite similar to our life also. Whenever someone is in trouble, everyone will reminded him of that the problem can arise at any point of time. So this is a text not only on science fiction, but this text has a close association with our life. So the children were excited about the coming out of the sun. And the children were anxiously waiting for the sun to come out. And ultimately, the rain stopped. And before that, the question every time we ask that, where did the children play? And you have to write down that the children played in the echoing tunnels of the underground city. And they sang of the summer and the sun, because they have not seen it, or when they saw it 7 years before, they were too young to remember that. So in the middle of everything, ultimately the sun came out, and as if the wait is finally over, and they are now ready to celebrate the sun, celebrate the moment, as if we are celebrating our successful moments. And the reference has been given, the writer referred to here in that line, that it was as if a hurricane had lost its sound. There were no motions or tremor, but peace. That because there were no sound, it's silence everywhere. No sound of rain, no sound of wind, no sound of thunderstorm. And the silence was so immense, one could feel as if ears had been stuffed. Silence also had a sound. And that we need to feel. We need to feel the sound of silence. The smell of the silent, waiting world came to them. And the sun came out after that. But as I mentioned before it, that from the beginning of the text you can understand, although the text starts with a despair, in the middle there is all hope and silver lining. But every time they were reminded of their future. Now look at that line, what the said. Their teacher said, "Now don't go too far." The teacher called after them, "You have only an hour." So every time they were reminded of the limitations of the sun. That the sun came out, it's true. The happiness is there, it's true. But it will last only for an hour. But you can understand that the children are free will. They fly according to their will. So they move around, they run around, they move around everywhere. And funnily, they commented that, "Oh, it's better than lamplight." So you can understand they were overjoyed. They were overwhelmed with joy. Because they can't express the situation. Because when someone is too happy, sometimes we lost words. We lost words to express ourselves. And that was the situation of these children, that they failed to express themselves in the middle of this situation. They stopped running and stood in the great jungle that covered Venice. The jungle grew and never stopped growing. As I already mentioned, that as it was raining, years after years, the color of the jungle also has been different. And they laugh, they run, they shout, they do all lot of things. They ran for an hour and did not stop running. So they continued running. Now look at here very interestingly. The writer here used, and I mentioned that in my presentation, that the writer here used a very typical structure to denote the psychological state of the children. Now look at that. In the next line, and then there is a dash and there is a stop there. So you can understand, and then you need to stop. Then you have to continue your discussion. And then in the middle of their running, one of the girls wailed. Everyone stopped. So it's looking dramatic. And every line the writer could have easily write the full sentences, but he hadn't mentioned the full sentences. The writer mentioned half sentence covering half of the line. The girl standing in the open held out her hand. "Oh, look, look," she said, trembling. The children gathered slowly to look at her open palm. And what was there? In the center of it was a single large raindrop. So you can understand Suddenly, the whole ambience changed, the whole atmosphere changed, which was there few minutes before. It suddenly changed to a completely different circumstances. And again, the despair returns. And as a result of that, what happens? The children stopped running, and the writer very, very pathetically said, their smiles vanished. So, how can they smile? That's why this text is a perfect example of human psychology, where happiness is an occasional episode. Happiness is very, very short lived. That's why this is a perfect example on human psychology. A boom of thunder startled them. So they were 1 second startled by the thunder, the lightning, the winds, the thunderstorms. Oh no! Lightning struck all around them. The sky darkened into midnight in a flash. So you can understand that the writer gave a pictorial description of the situations of the environment, and along with that he used a perfect example of the psychological areas of the children. The children stood at the doorway to the underground houses until it was raining hard. So you can understand, we live in hope. So they were waiting at the in front of the house doors. Then they closed the doors and heard the gigantic sounds of the rain falling everywhere. Now look at that. What question is being asked by them? Will it be 7 more years before the sun comes out again? And this question filled all of us with tears in our eyes. So pathetic, so touchy question. And it is a kind of a complete sacrifice towards nature. And someone said, yes. With pale faces, they looked out of the window at the world that was raining now, raining and raining steadily. So you can understand, at the end of the text, the writer used the raining word 3 times. That means to put an emphasis on the continuation of the rain. This is continuity. This is continuity, what we are referring to. If you look at different text also, suppose Robert Frost stopping by woods on a snowy evening. The last 2 lines, miles to go before I sleep and miles to go before I sleep. You can understand the poet used the same line again and again to put an emphasis on the finality of our life. That's why in the same motive, the writer here also used the word raining and raining and raining steadily. Okay, so I think you have understood these areas. If you have any questions, you can ask me anytime in the school group. So read the text well, follow the presentation and the audio analysis. I'll be back with some of the important points or the questions. Okay, so next we'll meet again in the next class, and we will continue our discussion with our new topic. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you.